Chapter 1. The Setting and Stakes. Gaugamela, near present-day Iraq, was the stage for what would be a legendary confrontation. Alexander's campaign across Persia had already seen victories at Granicus and Issus, but Darius, humiliated and determined, marshaled every resource available for a final, overwhelming stand. Gaugamela was chosen by Darius himself, a flat, open plain that he hoped would give him a tactical advantage with his larger army and war chariots. The Persian forces were a staggering sight to behold, estimated to number over 100,000 soldiers, including archers, infantry, cavalry, and scythe chariots outfitted to cut down Alexander's men in waves. Darius deployed war elephants for additional impact, their massive presence intended to inspire terror in the Macedonian lines. Against this overwhelming force, Alexander's army numbered just 47,000, making his odds seem impossibly bleak. For Darius, this battle represented his last chance to defend his empire, his throne, and his honor. For Alexander, it was an opportunity to fulfill his vision of a united empire, bringing the Persian king to his knees and claiming the vast lands that lay beyond. Alexander's men, loyal to their leader, knew that this was the battle that would either define their legacy or end their dreams of conquest. Chapter 2. Alexander's Battle Preparations. Alexander recognized the gravity of the situation and took his preparations seriously. He knew that victory would depend not on brute force but on tactical precision and exploiting weaknesses in the Persian formation. In the days leading up to the battle, he meticulously studied the terrain, positioning his men to account for the Persian army's advantages. He arranged his army in a double phalanx formation, a highly disciplined, flexible structure that would allow his men to shift and respond as needed. To counter Darius's scythe chariots, he instructed his soldiers to open ranks at the last moment, neutralizing the threat by allowing the chariots to pass harmlessly through gaps before closing ranks and engaging the remaining Persian forces. Alexander's cavalry, including his elite companion cavalry, was positioned on the right flank, while his trusted general Parmenion led the left flank. To further disorient the Persians, Alexander employed a tactic known as the oblique advance. Rather than advancing directly toward the Persian center, he led his forces at an angle, gradually pulling his army to the right. This maneuver would disrupt Darius's plans, forcing the Persian king to either adjust his formation or risk his forces being outflanked. Chapter 3. The Opening Moves. As dawn broke over the plain of Gaugamela, Alexander and his men moved into position, waiting for the signal to engage. Darius, hoping to use his numerical superiority to overwhelm the Macedonians, began the battle with a full frontal assault. His archers unleashed a hail of arrows, and his chariots charged forward, scythe blades gleaming in the early morning light. But Alexander's troops were prepared. When the chariots thundered toward them, the Macedonian phalanx parted just as planned, creating corridors through which the chariots passed harmlessly. Once the chariots were past, the Macedonian soldiers reformed and cut down the drivers and charioteers, neutralizing what Darius had hoped would be a decisive advantage. Meanwhile, Alexander led his right flank in a gradual but calculated advance toward the Persian left. As he moved, his oblique angle pulled Darius's forces into an increasingly stretched formation. Darius ordered his cavalry to counter Alexander's movements, causing the Persian line to shift to the right and creating a gap in the Persian ranks that would soon prove to be a critical weakness. Chapter 4. The Decisive Charge. As the Persian line began to fragment, Alexander recognized the moment he had been waiting for. He gathered his companion cavalry, signaling for them to prepare for a decisive strike. At the head of his elite cavalry, Alexander led a direct charge into the gap that had formed in the Persian line, aiming to strike at the very heart of Darius's forces. The charge was a breathtaking display of courage and speed. The Macedonian cavalry, skilled and disciplined, tore into the Persian ranks with a fury that shattered the already faltering lines. Alexander himself led the charge with his characteristic fearlessness, a spear in hand and his gaze fixed on Darius, who was visible in his chariot. Darius, realizing the threat and fearing for his life, began to lose control. His personal guard fought valiantly, but the force of Alexander's charge was overwhelming. In a fateful moment, Darius turned his chariot and fled, abandoning his soldiers to their fate. Seeing their king flee, the Persian troops' morale crumbled, and they began to retreat in disarray. The once mighty Persian army dissolved into chaos, each soldier fighting for survival rather than for victory. Chapter 5. Parmenians stand on the left flank. While Alexander's charge had broken the Persian center, his general Parmenion faced a fierce onslaught on the Macedonian left flank. Parmenian's forces were heavily outnumbered and in danger of being overwhelmed by the Persian cavalry. He sent desperate messages to Alexander, requesting reinforcements, knowing that if the left flank collapsed, Alexander's victory could quickly turn into a disastrous rout. But Alexander, deep in pursuit of Darius, was too far to immediately come to Parmenian's aid. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, he swiftly turned back with part of his cavalry, racing across the battlefield to relieve his embattled general. As he arrived, Alexander's presence bolstered Parmenian's troops, who rallied and repelled the Persian assault. The reinforcements forced the Persian cavalry to retreat, securing the left flank and ensuring that the Macedonian line held firm. Alexander's return to assist Parmenion was a crucial moment in the battle, showcasing his ability to adapt to rapidly changing circumstances and prioritize the overall victory over his personal pursuit of Darius. It was a demonstration of both loyalty to his men and a commitment to the integrity of his strategy. One of the enduring legacies of Alexander's conquests was the influence on language and literature across his empire. Greek became not only the language of administration and governance, but also the language of culture, science, and philosophy, forming a common linguistic thread that connected people from diverse backgrounds. This widespread adoption of Greek, known as Koine Greek, allowed for the transmission of knowledge, religious texts, and stories throughout the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and beyond. In literature, the Hellenistic period saw an outpouring of new genres and styles. Poets, playwrights, and historians adapted traditional Greek forms to reflect the multicultural world in which they lived. Theocritus developed pastoral poetry, depicting rustic life in an idealized fashion, which contrasted sharply with the urban complexities of the Hellenistic cities. Callimachus and Apollonius of Rhodes brought myth and folklore into the world of epic poetry, creating works that explored both Greek ideals and the exotic new cultures that had come into contact through Alexander's conquests. The influence of Greek language and literary forms persisted even after the fall of the Hellenistic kingdoms, impacting later cultures. For instance, the New Testament was written in Koine Greek, allowing it to spread widely across the Eastern Mediterranean and aiding the spread of early Christianity. Greek influence on Jewish scholars in Alexandria led to the creation of the Septuagint, the Greek translation of Hebrew scriptures, which became a central text for early Christians. These translations and texts, influenced by the Hellenistic cultural environment, allowed Greek thought and philosophy to merge with Jewish, Christian, and other religious traditions. Chapter 8: Hellenistic Influence on Religion and Early Christianity. Alexander's conquests created a cultural landscape in which religious ideas could travel and evolve. Greek, Egyptian, Persian, and Indian spiritual traditions mixed, giving rise to new cults, deities, and religious practices. The worship of gods like Serapis, a fusion of the Egyptian Osiris and the Greek Zeus, showed how cultures merged to create deities that appealed across cultural boundaries. Mystery religions, which offered initiates secret knowledge and promises of salvation, gained popularity across the Hellenistic world. These religions, including the cults of Isis and Mithras, combined Greek and Eastern beliefs and practices, appealing to diverse populations by addressing personal salvation and life after death. As these beliefs spread, they laid the groundwork for new religious movements that emphasized personal connection to the divine. The Hellenistic environment also influenced the early development of Christianity. Early Christian writers used Greek language and philosophical concepts to communicate their teachings to a broad audience. Stoic and Platonic philosophies, which were well known throughout the Hellenistic world, provided frameworks that Christian theologians later adapted to explain their beliefs. Paul the Apostle, for example, used Hellenistic language and ideas to spread Christianity throughout the Roman Empire, helping it become a universal religion rather than one tied to a single ethnicity or region. Chapter 9: Impact on Trade and Economic Exchange. Alexander's empire created vast new trade networks that spanned from Greece and Egypt to Persia and India, transforming economic relations across these regions. With Alexander's conquests, once isolated regions were linked by routes that allowed the flow of goods, knowledge, and cultural practices across vast distances. The Silk Road, which would later become a major trade route, saw its beginnings during the Hellenistic period, with Greek and Indian merchants exchanging silk, spices, ivory, gold, and other goods. In the bustling cities founded by Alexander, marketplaces thrived, filled with items from distant lands. In Alexandria, merchants traded Indian spices, Arabian incense, and African ivory, creating an unprecedented marketplace where East met West. These cities were not just centers of commerce but hubs for cultural interaction, as traders and travelers shared stories, customs, and religious beliefs. Trade routes also facilitated the spread of Hellenistic art, architecture, and ideas, as well as new agricultural practices and technologies that improved productivity and wealth. The expansion of trade had a lasting impact on the economies of the regions Alexander conquered. Coinage, once largely a Greek invention, became standard throughout his empire, simplifying transactions and promoting economic unity. The silver and gold coins minted under Alexander and his successors featured images of gods, symbols of cities, and eventually even portraits of rulers. This practice of ruler portraiture, borrowed from Persian influences and extended in Greek tradition, emphasized the unity of the empire under Alexander's legacy and established a common visual language that spanned from the Mediterranean to the Indus Valley.